you saying hello? Oh yeah, just okay. Hello. Hello, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Kyla, and in this video we are going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of September. This was a wild reading month for me, you guys. I read 13 books this month, which is a lot for me. Normally I sit in like the 5 to 10 range, depending upon what I'm reading, how long it is. But all of the books that I read this month, I was so excited for, and I was just like in the zone, and it just ended up being a great reading month. I read 9 physical books and listened to 4 audiobooks, and I also had 2 DNFs, which I will go over with you. If you're excited, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and let's just go ahead and dive into the books. So let's just start with the DNFs, so it's only up from here. The first one was The Island by Adrian McGinty. I tried to listen to this on audio and I DNF'd at 30%. I just was bored to tears. I didn't care what was going on. The main character was really annoying me. The husband was also really annoying me. Like the whole thing, I was just annoyed and I just didn't care. And I know this is like some people's favorite book, or at least one of the year, and I just like couldn't care less, and it just was not intriguing to me. The audiobook was cool in the sense that it did have like sound effects, so it wasn't the audiobook's fault. It was a me problem. I was just bored. And then the next one that I DNF'd was Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey. I got like 50 pages into this and I just like didn't care again. I just was not into it. So this one isn't just a DNF for now. It's actually Gabby Reed's book troop pick for the month of October. So I might revisit it later this month, depending upon how I'm feeling. But I just like was not in the mood for it, and it just wasn't hitting, and I was like, I'm not gonna waste my time. So I brought it back to the library and let someone else have a turn. And I might get it again this month. We'll see what happens. But those were the 2 that I DNF'd. Now let's move on to the books I actually enjoyed. So the first book that I finished this month was A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This is the second book in the A Court of Thorn and Roses series, and this was 5 out of 5 stars. I don't think I really need to even like go into it. But what I loved about this was it took everything that you liked about the first one and like completely shattered it, but in the best way possible. Like it's just a complete turnaround from the first one. If you know, you know. And it's like the best thing ever, and I was rooting for it, and I loved to see her progression throughout the entire story, and like her changes and the ebbs and flows of just what she's going through and what they're going through. My goodness gracious. I could gush forever, but I won't. 5 out of 5 stars. I'm actually reading the 3rd one right now. I just cannot. I love this series so much. Next, we have a cozy mystery, or at least I'm considering it cozy, and that was And Then They Were None by Agatha Christie. I read this as well as listening to the audiobook, and I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was a good time. It's a classic whodunit story, a cozy mystery. We have these characters who are all invited to an island, and they're invited by this person, but they're not exactly sure who it is, and none of them have actually met the person before, and then they start dying off one by one. And this is such a classic, and it was just fun. It was a good time. It was like the perfect read for just a cozy day. It's very short. The audiobook was great. I loved listening to it because we had different kind of voices for the people, and it was just a grand old time, and I loved trying to figure it out as I went. It was just fun. It was just so fun. This next one I really wanted to listen to before the summer was up, and that was One Italian Summer. I listened to the audiobook of this, and it was so good. If you are a fan of Gilmore Girls and Eat, Pray, Love, this book is for you. It's essentially very Eat, Pray, Love, where this woman, her mother passes away, and she is just feeling so lost in her life, and she just like doesn't know where to turn, and she actually had a trip booked to Italy with her mother, and she decides to go ahead and take the trip, and you know, she's having some rough time with her husband at the same time, and it's just like, she's like, I just need to get out. So she goes on the trip to Italy by herself, but the twist of it is that while she's there, she actually meets her mother like from the past. So her mother had spent the summer in Italy when she was younger, so when she gets there, she actually sees the younger version of her mother. So it's like a total twist, almost like ghost story, but not really. It truly gives Gilmore Girl vibes in the sense of like, it's them meeting and then becoming friends and like frolicking together in Italy. It's so good. And also the descriptions of food in this book is like so reminiscent of Eat, Pray, Love, and just if you love pasta or any kind of food descriptions, also this book is for you. It has all of those things. So it has like friendship story, it's very heartfelt, you have the Italian vibes. I mean, the descriptions in this book are incredible of like the scenery, but also the food, and then you have this underlying like almost like a mystery, but not really. It just feels like that while you're reading it, and I loved this. I thought it was such a good time and exactly the book that I wanted to finish out the summer with, and I gave it 4.5 stars. And then the next audiobook that I listened to this month was Sawkill Girls, and this was a book that I had heard about, kind of thrown around on BookTube, and also I've seen it pop up a few times on Goodreads, and it just sounded like something that I would really like. We have this like group of friends, and there's just this drama, and then these strange things start happening, and there's just kind of like mystery going on. So I was like, oh my god, that sounds so fun. And the audiobook was available at my library, so I went ahead and checked it out. This book was so not what I was expecting. I was not expecting there to be like a supernatural Stranger Things kind of vibe to this book. I really thought it was gonna be like just a good girl's guide to murder, like a good kind of sleuth mystery kind of happening. But this like took a turn, and I was so confused for so much of the book, but like not in a bad way. I was just like, what is happening? And I like had to keep listening to try to figure it out, and then it kind of hit me what was going on. And it was like so unexpected because I did not realize that that's the direction it was going. So if you like Stranger Things, if you like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and you wouldn't mind like a mashup of the two, this book is definitely for you. It was really fun. Like I said, it was confusing, but like not in a bad way. And then as this kind of mystery starts to unfold, it gets really interesting. And I loved the twists and turns. I really liked the characters. And yeah, it was just overall a good time. I gave it 3.5 stars. It wasn't like so good. It wasn't an all-time favorite, but I had a good time while I was listening to it. And then the last audiobook that I listened to in September was Come Closer by Sarah Gran. This is like a horror, I don't even want to call it a thriller, but a kind of just like a psychological kind of book and a horror at the same time. This follows our main character who, you know, has a good marriage, she has a good job, she works in architecture, and then one day she starts to do some strange things and possibly hear like a strange voice, and she's not quite sure what is going on. So she actually turns to like this quiz in a magazine to like see if you're possessed or whatever, and it takes off from there. And this was fun. It was an overall good time. The audiobook is so short, it's like 4 hours long, and this book is like a trip. That ending had my like jaw open on the floor of like some of the things that happened. I was like, what is going on? But this is so good because you're never quite sure if books are gonna go there, and this book like went there, and it was just like, I'm listening to it and I'm like, what shit, what? It was such a trip, but so fun. I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I think it's so good. If you're looking for like a quick audiobook to listen to or just a quick book and you don't mind, you know, horror mixed with like some psychological and with some paranormal, you will love this. It was so good. Moving on to the books that I read for reading vlogs this month, I did 2 reading vlogs. The first one was like an end of summer thriller horror book. It was kind of like a let's transition into fall kind of vlog. So if you haven't seen it or either of them, I will link them both below for you and also in the cards as well. So the first book that I read for the end of summer transitioning into fall vlog was Reckless Girls by Sarah Hawkins. I gave this book 2 stars. This was not a good time for me. Like sometimes I do not mind over the top thrillers, and that's really what this is. It's very over the top, very just not believable. And sometimes I don't mind that, but this one I just was so bored and just kept thinking like this would never happen. Never happen. And anyways, this book is following Lux and Nico. Lux and Nico live in Hawaii. Nico has a boat and he gets approached by 2 girls who ask him to drive them out to this small little island that has like this allure about it. It's got some, you know, history to it. And he's like, sure, why not? Absolutely. Lux is a little bit more hesitant, but she comes along for the ride. And as they're pulling up, they notice another boat there, and then, you know, some things start happening. And I thought this was gonna be like and then they were none, like things were gonna start happening and we were gonna try to have to figure out like what was going on and who was doing and that kind of thing, which does kind of happen, but literally within the last like 50 pages. Up until that point, we are just getting them hanging out on an island, and I was like, cool, like that's great, but like, can something happen now? Literally, it does not happen until the last second. So I did give it 2 stars. There were some parts of it that I enjoyed. I would say like the first like 50 pages as we're like getting into it are really interesting to kind of see how this kind of unfolds. I really liked Lux as a main character, and then also, you know, the last 50 pages, they kind of pick up as you're trying to like figure out what is going on. But 100 pages out of the book, 150, nothing happens. And so that's why I had to give it 2 stars. I just was bored, 2 tears in the middle, and just kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And then even at the end, I was just like, okay. Like that was not fun, but thanks. But yeah, overall, 2 stars. Not the best way to start off a vlog, but it was only up from there because the next book that I read for that vlog was My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. This was one of my most anticipated reads. I've been wanting to read this for a while and I finally got to it, and it was the perfect time because it was end of summer and it was just the perfect book for that time of year. This is truly like Stranger Things vibes, and just with the 80s and the friend group, it just is so fun but also terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I have no complaints about this book except for one, but I can't mention it because it is a little bit of a spoiler. But there was a scene in this book where I was like skimming as fast as I possibly could because I cannot. But other than that, this book was so fun. We're following Abby and Gretchen, who are best friends and have been best friends for a long time. And it actually starts at the beginning of their friendship, and you kind of see how their friendship built and built and built. And then we follow them into their high school years, which is where most of this book takes place. And if you've ever had a friend for that long, the vibes of this are so spot on, of just the gossip and the things you talk about and the things you're feeling when you're that young. It's just amazing. And then coming into their friendship and introducing other friends in high school, and they're, experimenting and whatever. And then, one of them maybe possibly, gets possessed, and everything unfolds from there. And this book takes so many twists and turns and is so mind-boggling, and some of the things that are happening are so gross but awesome at the same time. And I'm so excited to watch the adaptation of this. I have not watched it yet. I plan to very soon, and I just can't wait. 5 stars, hands down, no doubt. And then the last book that I read for that vlog was actually The It Girl by Ruth Ware. This was Gabby Reed's book troop pick for the month of September, and I gave this 4 stars. I had a good time. This is very much borderline dark academia. I wouldn't say it's quite there because it's not as dark as I was expecting it to be, but it's definitely borderline thriller dark academia. In this book, we are following a group of friends who met in college, and very much at the beginning of this, one of their friends, Amanda, dies, and 2 of them find her dead, and they think they know who did it, and that person gets put into jail. And then we have the kind of now chapters where the person who is in jail just died, and he to his deathbed claimed his innocence. So now they're kind of trying to go back and figure out did he actually do it? Was it someone else? And it goes from there. And I thought this was great. I loved the kind of dual timelines. I loved that it takes place on a college campus for part of it, and I loved the twists and turns of trying to figure out who it was. And something I think that Ruth Ware did very well was just when you thought that you had it figured out, because there are so many characters in play, she puts this seed of doubt and kind of starts to take it down one road and then is whoop, just kidding. And that happens quite a few times. I thought I had this pegged. I was I know exactly who it is. I know what's going on. And then, the twists start coming, and I obviously am not going to spoil anything for you, but I had a good time. The only thing that I will say is this book is over 400 pages, and I do not think that it needed to be that long. I think we could have done with 100 pages shorter and still gotten the same effect, still gotten the same story. So I do think it was a bit too long, which is why it didn't get a full 5 stars. But regardless of that, there was no point where I was bored to tears. I was just okay, we could have sped this up or left some of this out, and I still would have had the same effect. But other than that, I loved it, and I thought it was really good time. Second reading vlog that I did in the month of September was a cozy fantasy reading vlog, which was truly one of my favorite reading vlogs that I've ever done. And there's definitely going to be a part 2 coming, because there are just way too many cozy fantasies that I want to read, and it's such a fun genre. I freaking love it so much. It's just always feels like a warm hug, and these books just make you smile, and they're just always a fun time. So in that vlog, I read 4 cozy fantasies. The first one that I read was Sourdough by Robin Sloan. This book is definitely not for everyone. I go into more detail in that reading vlog, but it definitely is not for everyone. This book is really for people who love bread. And truly, I mean that with my whole heart. If you do not care about bread whatsoever, you're going to be bored to tears during this book. But if you love bread, especially sourdough, and you can appreciate the art of what sourdough is, this book is for you. In this book, we are following our main character, and she, has a very high stress job. She works in like the robot industry and, is crunching numbers and doing science things literally all of the time. And it's just very high stress. So at the end of the day, she just comes home and she's like, oh, I just don't want to cook or do anything like that. So she starts ordering from this takeout restaurant who leaves a menu on her door literally every single night. She orders from this place, and then the business shuts down and they're like, hey, we're moving, but we can't take our sourdough starter with us, so can you look after it? Here's how you make the bread, here's how you do everything, have a grand old time. And she's like, excuse me, what? And the story takes off from there. So it's very much like cozy. She's learning how to feed her sourdough starter and learning how to make bread, and through that she finds a passion in like helping people in another way. And it just brings you through her like figuring out that maybe like this high stress job isn't for her. Maybe she could find joy and passion in something else that wouldn't take so much of her time. And it's just, if you've ever had a high stress job or a job that you're just like not fully there with, you can relate to this character and what she's going through, especially in this whole like hustle culture world we have going on right now. It's so relatable in that sense. But also, this takes on a bit of a fantasy element, not completely, but a little bit, where like the sourdough starter is almost like a main character. And I don't mean that it talks or it does anything like that, but it's just so present, and there's some things that happen that just kind of put this little fantasy twist on it, and it's just fun. I gave this 4.5 stars. I had a good time. I love bread so much, which is why I think I appreciate this book probably more than others. But if you do love bread, please, please, please pick this book up. You will not regret it. The next book that I read for that vlog was Piranesi by Susanna Clark. I recently heard about this, and as soon as I did, I was like, I need to read that immediately because it just sounds like something that I would love. This is a story about a kind of twisted house. You're following our main character who is within this house, and he just is explaining like all of the twists and turns and what this house comes to be. But then it takes a turn, and as soon as this turn starts happening, you're like, wait a second, what? And it is the biggest plot twist that I could have ever expected in a book, let alone, like, it's not even a thriller, but it's one of the biggest twists that I've ever read. So, and I read a lot of thrillers and horrors, so like that's saying a lot, especially coming from a fantasy book. I did not see that twist coming whatsoever, which is why I loved this so much, because as it starts to unravel, your brain is just mind blown. Like, so much so that I tabbed this book, and I don't ever tab, and you can hear me like all my thoughts and experiences in that vlog. Like I said, I will link it below, but oh my gosh, this was wild. It was such a trip. The writing style is a little confusing at first, I will say that. It's very different. There's like random words that are capitalized, and I thought that that was like gonna come into play at some point, so I was trying to pay extra attention to the words that were capitalized, and it's just very interesting, and some of this is written in like journal entry form. So all around, it's just very interesting, but then you have this plot twist that happens that is just unreal, and it's just so good. This was 5 out of 5 stars. I cannot recommend this enough. Even if you aren't a fantasy reader, I think you will appreciate this book, and especially if you go into it not knowing anything at all, I really do think that you will love it. Then the last book that I read for that vlog was actually a fantasy novella, and that was Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna Maguire. This is the first in the Wayward Children series, and it's something that I've been wanting to get into this series for a while. It sounds just something like so up my alley. You have like kind of a magical school, you have a group of students, and you have some mysteries that ensue, and like that's everything everything that I love in books. So I was very excited for this one and I loved it. I gave this 5 stars. I literally have 0 complaints. I loved it so much. In this book, we are following Nancy, and Nancy has tumbled into another world, which is very much like, you know, they go through a doorway and they either tumble into like Alice in Wonderland or Narnia or Candyland, places like that. So all of the children in this school have kind of tumbled and then gotten thrown out, and they're not really sure like how to cope with the world. So this school kind of helps them deal with that and process and move on. So in this book, we are following Nancy, and Nancy has tumbled into another world and is now back, and her parents drop her off at this school, and she is very much like, I'm gonna get back to my world. And they're very much trying to tell her and encourage her to try and just process and move on. And while she's dealing and learning everything about this school, something happens, and her and some of the other students take it upon themselves to try and figure out what is going on. And this book actually took like some gruesome turns that I was not expecting. I thought it was going to be very like light and fluffy the entire time. And like it is, but there are some things where I was like, oh damn. Oh my goodness, I was not expecting that and not expecting it to get as gritty as it did, but I loved it. Like I said, 5 out of 5 stars. It was such a good time, and I'm so excited to continue with more of this series. We are getting to the end here. I have 3 books left, and speaking of series, I did read The Inheritance Games this month and loved it. 5 out of 5 stars again. I know I dished out a lot of 5 stars this month, but like I read a lot of good books, okay? And like I'm not gonna diminish my rating just because I have a lot of them. Like that just means that I'm picking right and I'm here for it. Anyways, I did read the first in the Inheritance Games this month, and I loved this. This was so fun. This was such high stakes and such an adventure, and I loved unpacking this family, and they're so twisted and conniving and just mysterious at the same time. And then you have like the extra mystery on top of this. So in this book, we are following our main character. Why can't I remember her name? Avery. Well, too many characters this month. We're following Avery, and Avery learns that she is inherited a huge lump sum of money, multiple properties, multiple businesses, charities, etc., and she doesn't know why. So she arrives at this house where this family lives in this house. They're like, she got the inheritance, why? And everyone is confused of why this girl, this random girl, has received this inheritance from this man. And so it really does unpack that, but also just so much else happens in this book. And oh my god, everyone is like a suspect to the mysteries that are happening in this book, and it's just so good. Like I said, it's very high stakes. This is like had my heart racing, and I loved it. Loved it. I'm going to continue with this series. There's 3 in the series. I'm reading Hawthorne Legacy this month, and I'm stoked for it. And the next book that I read this month was The Push by Ashley Audrain. I gave this book 3 stars. This book is so hard to rate, because I don't want to say that I had like a good time while reading it, because I definitely didn't. It was severely uncomfortable, and before you read this book, like please look up trigger warnings around it, especially around like postpartum depression and things like that. Because it's very uncomfortable. So I don't want to say like I had a good time. I gave this book 3 stars. I think it was great. I think the writing is impeccable. I think the story is very interesting and definitely had me like hooked and curious and wanting to know what was happening. And oh my god, the epilogue. Oh, like some of the I think that's probably one of the best epilogues that I've ever read. That last line, I cannot, it was so good. But again, I have a hard time like rating this because it was so uncomfortable and the subject matter is so hard and so intense that I just gave it 3. I was like, I don't really know where to go here. It's a 3. I don't really know what else to say about it. But again, look it up because it is very uncomfortable. Like, I don't know what else to say about it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put it down and let you figure out if you want to read that or not. And speaking of uncomfortable conversations, the last book that I read this month was Notes on an Execution. And this book was a lot. This book took me so much longer to read than I was anticipating for it being, because it's only 300 pages long, but there's just so much packed into this book, and I wanted to give each perspective their respect. So in this book, we are following an inmate who is on death row. So we get his point of view, counting down the hours until it is time for his execution. And then we also get chapters in between from his mother, from a sister that is involved with one of the crimes that he committed, and with the detective that also was investigating the crimes that he committed. And so you have these different women's perspective that all kind of collectively come back to him, and all of their experiences and everything that they've been through are because of this man and what he did. And it's so interesting. It's so heartbreaking. Each perspective, including his, makes you feel and think something completely different. And you're just going through so many emotions of like hatred to empathy to heartbreak to just utter like baffledness of like how someone can do something that he did. And it just brings up so many amazing conversations about obviously execution and the death penalty, but also like our fascination with serial killers and true crime, and you know, trying to think of like the family's perspectives and what they're going through, and like we all, you know, have this kind of obsession going on, and it just brings up so many feelings of like for what's going on in the book, but also kind of makes you check yourself too. I thought it was great. I gave it 4.5 stars. The only thing that like I have a gripe about is honestly the writing. This is so tiny. Like, and that's no fault of like obviously the author, or maybe it is their choice, but the book itself is like the writing's tiny, so it was a lot. It was really hard to read, but other than that, I thought it was great. And I think that if once you look up trigger warnings and that kind of thing, because there is a lot obviously as we're unpacking his crimes, so please look them up. But if it's something that you want to read, it's definitely going to raise a lot of questions and thoughts and feelings and that kind of thing. So just be in the right headspace. But if you want to be in that space, this book is incredible. And I think it's also a very important read. And yeah, so I'm happy to finish off the month with such an impactful book, but also it was a lot, and I'm just ready to dive into other things. Woo! We did it! That was the end of my wrap up. Holy moly, like I said, I read a lot. Thank you. If you are still here, you are the MVP, and give this video a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed already, please do so. Turn on the bell so you never miss a video. And I would love to hear in the comments what your favorite book was that you read last month, or if you're excited to read any of the ones that I mentioned here, please let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching and sticking with me through this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!
With you and I, the future is bright.